a wounded leopard, a silverback gorilla, two species that never cooperate until something happened deep in the Congolese forest that changed everything. It started with a cry for help that no one expected, and what followed shattered the limits of what scientists thought possible between predator and primate. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. We bring you the most emotional and unbelievable wildlife stories from around the world based on real behaviors, real field reports, and real encounters. The Kahuzi-Biega National Park stretched like a living ocean of green, hiding more than it revealed. Deep in the mountainous forest, silverback gorilla troops ruled the canopy with quiet discipline, while leopards stalked the shadows below, solitary and elusive. The two species coexisted, barely, but they never interacted. Until one morning, just after a storm, something disrupted the pattern. A low growl echoed through the trees, but not the aggressive kind that signaled a kill. It was fractured, strained, desperate. Gorilla tracker Jules Mboko froze mid-step. He was shadowing a family of eastern lowland gorillas, taking notes for a conservation project, when the sound reached him. Not from a gorilla. Not from a bird. It was feline. And it was close. Jules scanned the forest floor below the fig tree where the troop had paused. The dominant silverback, a massive male named M'Baku, was watching too. Not moving, just listening. Then the growl came again. Louder this time. It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a call. Jules quietly climbed down from the observation post and crept through the undergrowth, heart pounding. 100 yards west, he found broken branches, blood smears on leaves, and then a leopard, slumped against the trunk of a fallen tree. She was young, maybe 3 years old, and limping badly. Her right hind leg was swollen, punctured by what looked like a warthog's tusk. Her breathing was shallow. Her ribs rose and fell quickly. She looked up, saw Jules, and didn't move. But this wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what happened next. From the other side of the glade, M'Baku, the silverback, approached. Not with chest beating, not with charge, with stillness. Jules ducked behind a log, stunned. The silverback stood just 10 feet from the injured leopard. They locked eyes, the jungle held its breath. And then the leopard did something that defied everything Jules had read in 12 years of field work. She lowered her head, submitted. She didn't snarl, didn't bare her teeth. She asked, "For what? For mercy? For help?" Jules's hands trembled. He reached for his radio, but M'Baku was already moving. And what he did next would begin a chain of events that left not just Jules, but the world's top primatologists utterly speechless. M'Baku's massive frame moved slowly, his footsteps soundless on the thick forest floor. Vines clung to his arms as he approached the wounded leopard, but he didn't brush them away. His deep-set eyes never left hers. Jules, crouched behind a rotting log, could barely process what he was seeing. He knew this silverback, dominant male of the Mbembe troop, a leader known for his caution and strength. A wild gorilla approaching an apex predator wasn't just unusual, it was unthinkable. Yet here he was, walking toward her like she wasn't the most efficient killer in the forest. The leopard didn't growl. She didn't even shift. She let him come. M'Baku stopped just 2 feet from her body, his head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring. Then, impossibly, he reached out. His knuckles brushed gently against the leopard's injured leg. Jula's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't aggression, it wasn't fear. It was curiosity, maybe even compassion. The leopard let out a faint chuff, a sound Jules had only ever heard from mother leopards reassuring their cubs. The moment was surreal. One of the most powerful land predators in the region was not defending territory, not hunting, not retreating. She was asking for help, and the silverback was listening. M'Baku turned his head slightly and let out a soft grunt, a sound gorillas use to signal calm and trust. Then, in a moment that defied the most basic rules of wild behavior, he sat down beside her. Just like that. Jules could hardly believe his eyes. The leopard shifted weakly, her paw brushing against his foot. He didn't flinch. She didn't bite. They sat, predator and primate, in a stillness so intense it made the surrounding jungle feel like it was holding its breath. Jules slowly reached for his satellite radio. "This is Jules," he whispered, voice shaking. "Kahuzi Field Unit. You're not going to believe what I'm seeing. I need backup. I need cameras. I need everything." Static crackled. M'Baku just approached a wounded leopard, and he didn't attack. There was a long pause on the other end. "Repeat?" He sat down. "He's with her. I think she asked for it." The leopard rested her head on the dirt. M'Baku looked around, then pulled a leafy branch from a nearby bush, one Jules recognized as often used by gorillas to swat flies or clean wounds. M'Baku placed the branch on the ground. He didn't offer it directly, but the intention was clear. He was giving her something. Jules's heart raced. Something was unfolding here. Something ancient, intelligent, and completely undocumented. And the world hadn't seen it yet, but soon it would. By the time the backup team arrived with high-resolution cameras, drones, and behavioral specialists, Jules had barely moved. He stayed hidden, silent, documenting every second from the shadow of a fallen log. The leopard was still lying beside the silverback gorilla. M'Baku had not left her side. The branch he had dropped near her was now between them, lightly crushed by her outstretched paw. Her breathing had steadied. She was no longer shaking. She was resting. Not with fear, but with trust. The first camera crew, led by Dr. Helena Roth, a primatologist from the University of Oregon, was speechless when she arrived. Helena had spent her life studying primate empathy, especially among bonobos and mountain gorillas. But this, a gorilla offering company to a wounded carnivore, it didn't fit any known behavior. She adjusted her headset and whispered, "We're either watching the beginning of a territorial negotiation or something none of us have language for yet." The forest remained eerily quiet, as though nature itself was yielding the stage to this improbable connection. And then it shifted again. A rustling in the canopy overhead made the team tense. It wasn't wind, it was movement. From the higher branches, a juvenile gorilla, one of M'Baku's offspring, was watching. His name was Kibo, barely 4 years old, and his curiosity had pulled him from the troop's safe zone. "Kibo, no," Helena whispered to herself. "Stay there." But Kibo was already descending. He swung from a lower branch and landed softly behind M'Baku. The silverback turned slowly and gave a low grunt. A warning, but not of fear. Of boundaries. Kibo inched closer. The young gorilla had never seen a leopard this close, let alone one not baring its teeth or crouched in a tree ready to ambush. His hands gripped the bark tightly, eyes flicking from his father to the strange creature on the ground. The leopard raised her head. Kibo froze, and then something extraordinary happened. She licked her paw and, slowly, visibly weakened, reached toward the branch M'Baku had given her. She placed the branch across her chest, a signal, a mimicry, a gesture of shared ritual. The silverback grunted again, this time with less tension, and Kibo did the impossible. He sat down beside them. Helena mouthed the words before she dared speak them. "This is cross-species emotional learning. This is history." In that moment, it was no longer about injury or survival. It was about recognition. Somewhere in the overlapping instincts of these beings, hunter, protector, child, something ancient was unfolding. Not a treaty, not a truce, but a moment of pure presence, and the world was watching. The forest had its own rhythm, a silence between storms, a tension between tribes. But what unfolded now, in this fragile pocket of stillness, was something no one could have predicted. For nearly an hour, the cameras rolled without interruption, and Baku, the dominant silverback, remained beside the injured leopard. Kibo, the curious juvenile, stayed on the opposite side, occasionally mimicking his father's posture. And the leopard? She didn't move much, but her breathing had stabilized, her ears were upright, and she made no effort to leave. The message was clear: she was safer here, beside a family of gorillas, than alone in the jungle. But something was about to shift. A shadow, long and slow, crept from the western brush. Helena saw it first through the drone feed. A second leopard, older, male, and scarred, was stalking the perimeter. His movements were cautious but deliberate. He wasn't hunting. He was watching. The injured female raised her head. Her ears flicked, alert. M'Baku turned his torso slightly but remained seated, his eyes locked on the newcomer. And for the first time, Jewel felt true danger. Not because the male was hostile, but because this balance, this delicate nonverbal treaty, might collapse if instincts took over. "This male is probably her mate," whispered Helena, "or a rival. Either way, this moment could end everything." The male circled at a distance of 20 feet. He sniffed the air, watched Kibo, watched M'Baku, watched the cameras. Then he stopped. He sat down, not submissively, but observantly, like a sentry at the edge of sacred ground. For 10 minutes, no one moved. Then the injured female gave a sound, low, breathy, almost imperceptible. It wasn't a growl, it was an invitation. The male did not respond, but his posture shifted, his tail lowered, his eyes softened. He was deferring. Helena covered her mouth in disbelief. "This isn't just survival," she whispered. "This is community, a community not bound by species, but by something deeper, shared trauma, empathy." Jules adjusted his lens and zoomed in. M'Baku lifted his arm and scratched gently near the leopard's wound, not touching it directly, but close enough to stir the flies. A protective gesture, an act of service. And that's when Helena saw the impossible. The male leopard, silent and still, blinked slowly and turned away. He vanished into the trees, not out of fear, but trust. He had come to assess. He had chosen to leave her there, because somehow, some way, the silverback had become her guardian. By dawn the next morning, the research camp was buzzing with a tension that wasn't born of fear, but awe. Footage of the previous day's interaction had already been backed up on multiple drives. Scientists huddled in hushed conversations around field monitors, whispering theories that bordered on sacrilegious within the world of wildlife biology. Empathy, social mimicry, interspecies communication. None of the classic explanations fit what was unfolding beneath the canopy. Jules hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He'd remained near the edge of the glade with Helena, both afraid to blink, fearing the spell might break. The injured leopard hadn't moved much. Her wound had begun to dry, and she had licked it clean through the night, but her rear leg remained useless. Still, she hadn't attempted to flee. She didn't need to, because M'Baku was still there. So was Kibo. And unbelievably, so were two more gorillas now. An adolescent female named Tamu and a younger male named Django had approached early in the morning. While hesitant, they'd followed Kibo's cues, settling into a loose semicircle near the leopard. They weren't playing, they weren't grooming, they were watching and learning. It was Helena who finally broke the silence. "We have a choice," she said softly to Jules. "We document this, or we intervene." Jules frowned. "You mean help her? She won't survive with that leg. Not without antibiotics, not without treatment." Jules hesitated. If they sedated her and carried her off to a sanctuary, they'd save her life. But they'd also destroy the unprecedented interaction happening between two species that had never before been known to share space, let alone form a bond. "She chose him," Jules said, eyes fixed on the gorilla, "and he accepted." Helena nodded, her voice tight. "But she'll die, and the world will call us cruel if we don't act." Just then, Kibo did something remarkable. He walked toward the leopard, slowly. Then he sat directly in front of her and placed a handful of crushed leaves near her paws, ones the gorillas often chewed to soothe inflammation. The leopard didn't flinch. She leaned forward and sniffed them, and for the first time since her injury, she purred. It was faint, fragile, but real. Helena gasped. "She's responding. She's accepting their treatment." Jules turned, face pale. "What if we're not meant to interfere?" He looked at her, then at M'Baku, who met his gaze across the glade, not as an animal, but as a presence, a guardian. And in that moment, Jules knew they were standing on the edge of something unrecorded, ancient, and sacred. The real question now was not what the scientists would do next, but what the gorillas would. The mist settled over the treetops like a veil. Morning sun pierced through the canopy in soft beams, bathing the glade in golden silence. For the first time in 2 days, the air felt still. Not like before, when stillness meant fear or uncertainty, but something else now. Reverence. Jules stood at the edge of the clearing, camera in hand, but heart conflicted. Every instinct in him as a conservationist screamed that intervention was necessary. The leopard's leg was still swollen, and though she had managed to shift her weight and lick her wound, infection loomed like a shadow. But something more profound had rooted itself here. Trust. And not the kind that could be measured with scientific instruments or cataloged in behavioral journals. This was ancient, unwritten, sacred. M'Baku had not moved far during the night. He had stayed seated beneath the same towering fig tree, near the leopard, his massive frame silent and aware. Occasionally, he would grunt softly, a low, rhythmic sound the other gorillas recognized, a signal of calm, of watchfulness. The juvenile Kibo had returned to his troop, but now came back and forth with bundles of chewed leaves, twigs, and even water-soaked moss from a nearby creek. Once he placed the moss beside the leopard's head. She lapped at it slowly. The message was clear. They were caring for her. Helena had cried when she saw it. Not loudly, just 2 silent tears as she crouched beside Jules, eyes wide with wonder. "We're not witnessing survival," she whispered. "We're witnessing stewardship." Around noon, something changed. The leopard rose, shakily but with purpose. She didn't walk, she couldn't. But she stood, wobbling, and looked straight at M'Baku. Then she did something that defied every known record of feline behavior toward primates. She nuzzled him. She leaned her head against his shoulder and rested it there. M'Baku didn't flinch. He merely closed his eyes. The cameras rolled. Jules didn't breathe. Not even the birds chirped in that moment. Then the female leopard turned and, using only 3 legs, limped away into the forest, pausing every few steps. M'Baku did not follow. Neither did Kibo. But she stopped once, at the edge of the glade, looked back, and chuffed. That sound again. that deep vibrational purr used only between mothers and cubs, a sound of farewell, of gratitude. Then she was gone. Helena sank to her knees. It wasn't just an ending, it was a passing. The gorillas had fulfilled their role. Whatever ancient code they had followed, something beyond human understanding, they had honored it. 3 weeks later, Jules received a call from a poacher rehabilitation center on the far edge of the reserve. A young female leopard had been spotted near the river, walking with a pronounced limp, but hunting, eating, surviving. She was alive. But that wasn't the part that stunned him. She wasn't alone. With her was a juvenile gorilla never before seen in the area. Observers noted how he sat nearby while she rested. He never approached too close, nor did he try to return to his troop. He was simply watching over her. When Jules told Helena, she covered her mouth and whispered, "Kibo." A new story had begun, and the world had no words for it. What happened in that forest wasn't just a miracle of biology. It was a moment that shattered boundaries we believed were set in stone. Between predator and protector, between instinct and intention, between what we expect from nature and what nature still has to teach us. M'Baku didn't save the leopard because he had to. He did it because something inside him recognized the value of her life. And in doing so, he reminded us of something we often forget. Compassion is not a human trait. It's a universal language. If this story touched your heart, help us share it. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and send this video to someone who still believes in hope. Let's remind the world that courage, kindness, and unexpected alliances still exist, even in the wildest corners of our planet.